would need to be brought in?
We'll bring Grant in.
Waiting for the recording to start. Okay, let's get started. I'll call this group to order, and I need a motion to approve the agenda and consent items.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor? And the approval of the minutes of November the 16th. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes as published? Seeing none, can I have a motion to approve the minutes, please?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Okay. Thank you. Are there any members of the public there?
There are not any in attendance right now.
There are not. Okay. So we will move to commission members' reports. Peg, do you have any report?
Nothing to report.
Eddie?
Nothing to report.
Okay. Daphne?
Nothing to report.
Kirian?
Yeah, I attended the city council meeting on December 2nd, and it was really interesting that and amazing that the city was given the Governor's Smart Community Award for the pre-approved ADU program. And I know I attended that when it was unveiled, and there was so much community support. So that's really amazing that Lacey was recognized for that award. So yay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that was Ryan and Jessica and someone else.
Yeah, that was a great project that came out of the affordable housing strategy plan back in 2017, first identified, and then Ryan and Jessica put together a program with a launch, and also it was supported by Public Affairs Department, John Koch and Donna Feliciano, and of course we had that first open house, had a lot of response. I think we're planning for somewhere around 50. We probably had double that show up at the council chambers. And that was the end of February of 2019. And we had a lot of interest, and then COVID hit, and it's kind of waned a little bit. But through that process, Olympia liked the program, and so did Tomar, and they wanted to join, add to it. So they entered into interlocal agreement with us. So we had now a total of 4 plans. And so it turned out to be a very nice program. Now that we're kind of a year and a half into it, it's probably time we do some more outreach about the availability. So we'll probably start planning something like that over the next year. In addition to the Governor's Board, I just want to highlight that the Commerce is also producing a video on the Smart Communities Award.
Oh, cool.
And so Friday afternoon, their videographer was here at Lacey interviewing the mayor, myself, and then we went out to one of the actual ADUs that was built and met with the owner of that, and she did a great job of talking about why she chose to do an ADU, downside Asian place, and also has a tenant there, and what that means for that tenant. So it's a nice little presentation. I think her ADU is just under 500 square feet, but it's really well designed inside. So we got a lot of footage inside that will, once the Commerce is done with the video, we'll be able to do a joint release of that.
Great. Just to finish up with the commission members, Mark, do you have a report at all?
No report this time.
Okay, and Robin? Okay. All right. Rick, over to you.
Yes, I have a couple of items of similar themes. So I want to make sure the planning commission is aware that we are getting ready to launch our second virtual open house on the community work group on homeless planning effort. So the community work group on homeless members of about 23 committee members have been working for the last 14 months and over 20 virtual sessions to learn more about homelessness, talk about the issues, concerns, get information, listen to subject matter experts, and develop principles and goals. And now we're at the stage where they just finished a focus session that started in September. I think there was 7 meetings, 2 weeks apart, to really go through the various goal topics and identify strategies that they think should be included in the plan. And so this virtual open house is really going to highlight that more recent work of these strategies to get feedback from the broader community. So there'll be a real good information on the process, what the community's worked on, links to various informational resources, and then the open house will also have a section where people can go in and do live surveys and then go back in and see the live results. So hopefully those surveys will populate over time as the open house is attended. Again, this is a virtual open house, very similar. If you remember the one we did last February, you'll have to register. People will have to register to participate and comment. You'll be able to go through the various pages and put sticky comments right onto them. And as I said, there'll be links to a Mentimeter program where you can actually give more direct feedback that can be used for documentation of the effort. So I will tonight send out a brochure on it. That brochure will also have a QR code, and that'll take you to the city website where it'll be the location people can log into the virtual open house. Unfortunately, part of the challenges with technology is the link they give us to build the website is also the live link. So we can't send that link out right now because then you're maybe going in there while we're finishing it. But it will be live on Friday. So the website will be the portal into it when that link does go live. So if you have any questions, feel free to let me know.
What's the date on that, Rick?
Oh, thank you. It launches this Friday, and it's December 10th through Monday, December 20th. And again, that's a nice balance, or the benefit of a virtual open house is we can keep it open and to try to get as much feedback and support into it. So as I send this information out to all of you, please pass it on to your networks in the community and try to get the word out as best you can, because it's something that we really want to try to get good support in the work group, or the members themselves want to hear from the public.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Robin, do you have a question?
Thanks.
Yeah, so I remember, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Yes.
I remember when the first open house launched, and are you using the same like application?
Yes,
I think the Athena group built it for us, but that wasn't the name of the application. So
it was, Conveil website platform.
that's what it is. It was neat. I've been telling people about that, but when we did that open house at the beginning of the year, I think it was December, January of this year, the goal was to get a lot of input, and there was an interest in getting input from people in Lacey in particular. But I don't remember if an additional open house session was a part of the plan at the beginning. Has this been added? Like, has there been continued interest in getting additional feedback from the community to get to, I don't know, consensus?
That's a great question, because we started this process in COVID, and this is a process you typically want to have in person. It's facilitated, and we had scheduled in planning out the process initially, we scheduled various points where we'd get community engagement and be using different forums or formats. And you're right, Robin, that session we had back in February was the open house. And then we were looking at doing something a little bit different at this stage, thinking we'd be out of COVID and be more in person. But because of that, we had to shift our focus and scheduling. So that's why we're going back to the same type of virtual open house product. It's the best tool we could have right now with the conditions of not being able to have large gatherings in person and trying to finish out this project. The other thing we switched in the process, because we're planning on having a series of, I think it was like 7 meetings to get the work group and facilitate conversation to come to some consensus or conclusions. But we found in the virtual environment, it's very difficult to have a, lack of a better phrase, a collaborative discussion, because it's siloed pieces, and pretty soon you're looking at a screen for 2 hours and people are getting distracted. So it's very difficult in that virtual environment. So over this last several months since September, we had a sense of, from the conversation, what strategies they were interested in and what they fit under the various goal categories, that we've set up a very focused 1-hour meeting where they'd come in, we'd have a very broad overview of the goal, the strategies being considered, and then they'd actually go through a voting process using a Mentimeter program. And so with that, we were able to get direct feedback. Now it's all, there was never complete consensus, but it gave us a point where they could see where the work group was, what they would support as a recommendation at this point and what's not. Now is the time to get that community engagement to weigh in on that before they make their final decision or recommendation to council.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank
The
you.
other item I wanted to have the planning commission already, probably seen articles in the Olympian, but the city of Olympia will be working on closing down the unsanctioned camp area in Deschutes Parkway. That's going to happen tomorrow. There's been a lot of coordination between Olympia outreach staff and some of the service providers and advocacy groups. Part of the strategy of what Olympia is using is trying to figure out what to do with some of those individuals that are being removed, and they're going to be looking at probably purchasing hotel rooms for up to a 30-day stay, and some of those hotels could be located in the Lacey area. So I just want to let the planning commission aware that that's going on. We are in communication with Olympia staff. They gave us some heads up, and we've shared contact information so we can coordinate that response. And if there are any issues, we can address them as quickly as possible for the best for the community as well as the individuals. So just want to let the planning commission be aware of that. If you do have any questions, again, feel free to contact us and we'll get you the information if we don't have it. That's it for my report.
So Rick, that's one of the steps in the overall plan, was to do that piece, correct?
Which piece?
Towards the homeless effort, that this is Olympia's contribution to support this action.
Well, where the work group plan, the homeless response plan is looking at regional coordination, how we coordinate regionally.
Mhm.
This particular effort is Olympia dealing with a situation in their community, and it got to a point where they actually have to remove the campsite. And so in doing so, they're trying to, Olympia and the city of Olympia is concerned of, okay, you move them, where are they going to go? So they're trying to minimize the impact to those individuals that are currently living in the Deschutes encampment. So we're not involved with it, other than there's just awareness what's going on, and if there are issues that we can connect, know who to talk to, and figure out how to resolve it as quickly as possible.
Okay, thank you.
Rick, is there any tie-in to the virtual open house with the beginning to republicize the ADU availability, or that's a possibility for, low rent income kinds of housing?
No, because while the ADU is a strategy to provide lower cost housing, it's not directly related to the homeless work group efforts, because that's more directed on either early prevention, rapid rehousing, to the emergency response type situations when people are in a homeless condition. So while they're generally related, there wouldn't be cross-pollination in their open house.
Wouldn't work, okay. All right, okay, thank you. All right, I understand that we're going to hear about the housing, wait a minute, if I could read, I'd be much better, the Housing Implementation Initiative. So Ryan, I guess.
Sure, I'll take it from here. So wanted to brief the Planning Commission on 3 different housing related initiatives that are moving forward through the council process. So this is informational tonight. There's no action that the Planning Commission needs to take. These 3 items will be in front of the city council for a briefing on Thursday. So day after tomorrow on the 9th. So they'll see basically the same presentation that you're going to see tonight on the housing initiatives, but then also a presentation on the remaining items on the tree regulations. So they have adopted the urban forest management plan, but not yet the regulations associated with the plan. And so we still have this outstanding item related to how we regulate HOA open spaces and what do we do for tree removal requests in those. So we've got some proposed language that we're going to have the city council review on Thursday night for that as well. So if you're interested, you're more than welcome to attend. It's going to be a lot of Ryan talking to PowerPoint, but it'll be good information and things that the council's definitely been interested in, and Planning Commission as well. So welcome you to attend that night. So yeah, back to the housing related.
Was that Thursday? Is this coming Thursday night? Is that the one you're
Day after
referring
tomorrow,
to?
correct? Yep,
Okay.
at 4 o'clock. So 4 p.m. on that. So get back to the housing initiative. So, the Planning Commission is well aware that we don't have, a housing staff or a housing program. And so when it comes to things like, how do we affect change in our kind of housing goals and policies, really one of the tools that we do have in our toolbox is kind of rules and regulations. And so I'm going to talk about 3 different initiatives related to our regulations. One being the low density zone consolidation, which the Planning Commission spent 9 months on. Certain members weren't on the Planning Commission yet, so I think it's important to go through it. And Commissioner Vasquez will be a part of the council when this goes to the council for formal consideration after the first of the year. So that'll be good. The second item is related to a fee waiver proposal. So this would extend our fee waiver that we currently provide to nonprofits to the private sector providing affordable units. And the last item is extension of our multifamily tax exemption program. So that's our multifamily tax exemption program is set to expire here in the next couple of years. And so we're recommending to extend that. So with that, if there's any questions, let me know. Feel free to stop me. I'm going to share my screen and we can go. All right, hopefully you can see that. Okay, so the first thing is the low density zone consolidation. So this is changes to our Lacey Municipal Code 16.13. And what this does is essentially take the reason it's called the low density zone consolidation is it's consolidating our 2 low density zones. We have 2 low density 0 to 4 units per acre and low density 3 to 6. Basically, it makes everything low density. We don't have the distinction between the 2 anymore, and everything would be 6 units to the acre or under. The other big change that I'm going to talk about here a little bit later as well is that it would also permit duplexes and triplexes in this zone, and those actually would not be subject to density requirements. So single family residential on individual lots would still have to meet density requirements, but duplexes and triplexes would not. So we'll start at the beginning of all this, which is we have the housing element of our comprehensive plan, which really sets forth kind of the framework for all of the housing goals and policies that we'll deal with in the city. And there are policies or I guess goals within this housing element that really support what we're doing in terms of kind of densification of our low density areas. So specifically looking at our first goal, making sure that we have a sufficient number of single family dwelling units, multifamily units, and other group and special needs housing to provide a selection of rental and home ownership affordable housing opportunities for everybody. So a real important goal, and that really speaks to this low density zone consolidation. The other one is goal number 4, which is achieving housing that is compatible and harmonious with existing neighborhood character while allowing infill and providing for environmental sensitivity. So, when you're, having influence over low density residential neighborhoods and you're looking at putting in, duplexes and triplexes, obviously you want to make sure that those types of units are compatible with existing neighborhood character. One of the specific places that this actually comes from is our affordable housing strategy. So this was adopted, I think, in early 2019, and it set forth a number of specific actions that the council could take to incentivize or increase the amount of affordable housing in our community. And one of the actions, action number 7, specifically talks about reducing minimum lot size, lot widths, and density minimums in our older, more or less dense neighborhoods. Basically, looking at that low density 0 to 4 zone as a way to be able to do that. This means that it's in older established neighborhoods, particularly, especially because there are few vacant parcels left. And I'll talk about kind of our supply and demand issue here in a little bit. It's also part of our housing action plan. So our housing action plan was adopted back in September, and that set forth a variety of different housing actions. As Planning Commission is aware, you've reviewed this, and one of them is to increase the types of housing allowed in low density residential zones, duplexes, triplexes, et cetera. So this also looked at the various gaps that we have in our housing supply and ways that we can address that through this low density zone consolidation. So as I mentioned, this is really a supply and demand issue. So, we don't have enough supply and we have too much demand. It shouldn't be any surprise to anybody. And it's also kind of a little bit of a math problem in that our population of Lacey and the urban growth area is projected to increase by 22,000 people by the year 2045. However, our city limits are nearing build out. So we don't have the available residential land to accommodate too many more units. In fact, we have less than 30 vacant properties, and that 30 number is a 2019 number. So we haven't updated that recently, but I can't imagine that that we have more than 30 vacant properties. I'm sure we have probably quite a bit less. So, how do we accommodate that huge population influx in our city? Well, we have to do that through infill and redevelopment. Here's a graph that's right out of the housing needs assessment, the gap analysis that was done by TRPC with the housing action plan. And this shows our 25-year housing needs. So getting back to 2045, how many number of dwellings that are projected to be built, but also tying that to the income. So if you look at where our highest demand is, so the highest number of units is in our 50 to 80%. This is AMI, area median income. So our highest demand is 50 to 80% AMI in Lacey. So we obviously have demand across the scale, but this is our biggest kind of sector of our population that the demand is highest, which is really going to be, those folks that are in multi-family dwelling situations. And it's going to be that, those smaller houses, it's going to be in duplexes and triplexes and those kinds of things. So how do we do that? Well, we do that through, accommodating these types of units in our existing single family neighborhoods. So I wanted to point out, not only do we have, this low density zone consolidation, but we also have a number of housing initiatives that this is complementary to. And one is that we're looking, we already reduced fees for affordable housing for the nonprofits building affordable housing, but we are also looking to extend that to the private sector as well. Talk about that here in kind of the next segment of the presentation. We've done a lot related to our permit streamlining. So hopefully within the near future, we'll have a brand new permit system at the City of Lacey with online functionality and those kinds of things. But also we have our pre-approved accessory dwelling unit program that we've already talked about tonight, and the success of that and how that really lowers the initial burden for somebody to have to get designed plans. We've got those design plans sitting right at our front counter that anybody can use to put an accessory dwelling unit in Lacey. We're also providing city-owned property to nonprofits to build units. So we have I think it's an Oxford House proposal at this point that may be using some city property to build units here in the near future. We also have directed a portion of our state sales tax for affordable housing and moving that forward as well. Finally, zoning changes. So that's another tool we have in our toolbox, and that's what we're talking about here tonight, and particularly this section is the zoning changes. So let's talk a little bit about this, what specifically is being amended. So as I mentioned, this would consolidate the two existing zoning districts that we have in our low density residential, and it would utilize the existing low density 3 to 6 zoning standards. So it would make all one low density zone up to 6 units per acre. Properties currently zoned low density 0 to 4 would be able to develop up to that 6 units per acre with the advantage of the reduced lot sizes that you would have at 6 units per acre. So low density 0 to 4, that lot size is large. So 4 units per acre anymore is not really any kind of urban level of density. Would also allow duplexes or triplexes to be built on an existing lot, or an existing home could also be converted. This would be allowed to exceed maximum density requirements. So this does allow for above 6 units to the acre for the individual duplex or triplex within a neighborhood. It also proposes to reduce the rear setback from 20 feet to 15 feet, allowing a little bit additional space in the rear yard to build. We also, as part of this proposal, the Planning Commission put forward reducing a single-story detached ADUs, the rear setback for those from 15 feet to 5 feet. And those actually have already been approved. One piece of this, I guess, that has already been approved by the council is that. So with our pre-approved ADU plans, it was really important to get that rear setback down to 5 feet to allow as many of these as we could in rear yards that were larger and could make room for those. So the Planning Commission might remember some of these maps that we shared with you along the way. These are maps that we provided showing where lots are that could be converted to duplex or triplex lots, showing basic or subdivided, I guess, too, under the allowable minimum lot size of 5,000 square feet. So these are parcels that are zoned low density residential, that are near sewer. I think the definition of near is within 200 feet of sewer and over 10,000 square feet in size. And so this is First Northeast Lacey. So you can see the city limits here in the tan. So if you look on the right-hand side, that's Meridian Road. So most of the lots are kind of clustered around Meridian and 31st Avenue Northeast. And there's a sporadic number of lots kind of throughout Meridian campus that might allow for something like that as well. So, you know, real kind of minor allowance for the number of lots in this area. But really where this would apply the most would be in South Lacey, especially in the older neighborhoods. So if you look kind of right in the center of the map, that's actually Hicks Lake. So if you look kind of north and west, or kind of up and left of Hicks Lake, that's where primarily the number of lots are that would be able to take advantage of this zone consolidation, which is right around Ruddle Road. So between, you can kind of hopefully see Ruddle Road kind of taking a little bit of a snake route there that would
See my house.
There you go. So it would be the older neighborhoods between basically Carpenter Road and College Street, north of Hicks Lake, that would be able to take advantage of this. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what this might look like for a specific vacant lot. And there's not too many of them around. You know, a vacant lot could have a house that's been demolished, or maybe it was never built on in a standard, you know, subdivision in that area of town. So you've got a primarily built out single family neighborhood with this existing vacant lot. Well, under the proposed regulations, what could you do? First, you could do on the left-hand side, you could subdivide. Let's say this is a 10,000 square foot lot. You could subdivide into 2 single family homes. So that would allow you for 2 5,000 square foot lots that you could put 2 houses on. You could also subdivide and put 2 townhomes. That's the right-hand side there. So, you know, that would be essentially a duplex with a property line that splits that right down the middle. So that would be essentially 2 attached single family dwellings. Another thing, so you know, the important thing with this is that it does provide for home ownership opportunities. You know, that's, I think, a significant part of this as well, is that it doesn't just only say duplexes and triplexes, but you could also have additional, you know, sales. So these would be, you know, sold fee simple. You own each unit this way. If you were more interested in doing like a for rent proposal, then you'll be looking at a duplex or a triplex. So on the left, a duplex where you would rent out kind of both sides, or maybe be owner occupied in one half and rent out the other half. You'd be able to do that under this proposal. And then a triplex, very similar on the right hand side there. Instead of 2 units, though, you would have 3. So provide that rental opportunity here. So I did want to mention that there are some other factors that go into this that affect development feasibility, not only lot size and sewer availability and those kinds of things, but also, there are some things that might prevent this from happening. One of those is the private covenants. So when a newer neighborhood, most of them have private covenants if they're single family residential that say single family residential uses are the only thing that's allowed in that neighborhood. And those are privately, enforced. So those aren't things that the city would regulate. But if somebody went and wanted to do a duplex in their neighborhood and their covenant said they couldn't, then their HOA would have to enforce that. As I mentioned, utility availability, you're really going to need to have sewer anywhere these are proposed in order to have the space available. If you're putting in a septic and drain field or something like that, it's just not going to have enough space to be able to do anything of a higher density on an individual lot. There's also economic considerations. So, one of the things that would prevent some of this from happening would be, people that have valuable property, especially valuable homes. If you had a $500,000 house, you're not going to tear that down for a duplex or a triplex. That house has enough value that, that's just not going to be feasible. So really, you'd be looking at most likely vacant properties or properties that are distressed enough that something like this would make sense, where you'd increase the development potential of the lot or the house. We also have significant design review and compatibility requirements within our municipal code. This is something the Planning Commission was aware of and reviewed quite a bit. I'll show you some slides as far as some of those that meet our design review standards. And really, our design review says, hey, if you do something like a duplex or a triplex in an existing single family lot, in an existing single family neighborhood, it has to, essentially meet the same requirements as the single family lot does. So, that means things like, roof pitches, siding types, orientation of the front porch and the garage. They all have to be complementary to the existing single family neighborhood. So it really would blend in nicely. And finally, the Planning Commission looked also at the traffic impacts. We heard a lot from the public when we did the public outreach that there were concerns about what traffic impacts would be within existing single family neighborhoods if a duplex or a triplex was constructed. And these are our trip generation rates right out of the ITE manual, the Institute of Traffic Engineers kind of Bible when it comes to how many trips a certain use generates. So you can see that a duplex does generate a little bit more than 1 p.m. peak hour trip. So a single family home is right at 1, duplex 1.12, so just slightly above. And that's the duplex in total. That's not each half. Each half would be like 0.56. And then a triplex is a little bit more than a trip and a half in that PM peak hour. So not a significant increase, especially if you were to get, 1 duplex or triplex in your neighborhood. That's not going to be a massive increase in trips. Okay, so what do these look like? I did some kind of searching around town, some of those that I thought did a really good job of meeting the design review standards, so we could see exactly what this kind of looks like in action. And we've seen this type of development occur in the older neighborhoods, I'll say around kind of Golf Club Road, between Golf Club and Lacey Boulevard, between Slater Canyon and College Street. It's an area that's been zoned for moderate density residential for a number of years. And so we have seen some of these things happen over the last decade or two. So this is a standard style duplex on Hall Street. Hall Street is in that area I just mentioned. So you can see there kind of a standard style duplex design, just kind of traditional with you can see the roof pitch, the siding type, the garage door orientation, very similar to kind of an older neighborhood in Lacey. This is another project kind of in that same area. This is actually, it looks for all intents and purposes like it's a single family home, but it's actually a duplex. And this is on Willow Street, south of Lacey Boulevard. So not only is this a duplex, but it also has a duplex behind it as well. So it appears when you drive down Willow Street that, it looks like a single family home, but if you can see kind of where that red truck's parked to the left there, there's a driveway that accesses the second duplex unit within this, and then that additional duplex that's in the back. But again, very complimentary, very, roof pitch, siding type, garage orientation, very standard for an older neighborhood in Lacey. This isn't a duplex, but it's a single family home with an ADU incorporated within it. But this is an example of new development within a newer area of Lacey. This is actually in Horizon Point. And it's immediately south of the Capital City Golf Course on 66 and Bailey Street. So you can see this, the front door is oriented towards 66th Avenue. That's kind of the door that's on the left-hand side there. But on the right-hand side, that where you can see that kind of stoop with the steps coming down, that's actually the access to the ADU off to the side. So you can see there that you have a very well integrated second unit right within an existing single family home in a new single family home that was designed to have 2 units contained within it. And I thought it did a great job of kind of disguising the fact that it was actually, a single family home with an ADU. This is a triplex example. So this is the Housing Authority's recent project at the intersection of Golf Club and 14th, and they've got other development around there now. This is a little bit of an older picture. And so we've got, the kind of traditional 3 triplexes with garages in the back off of the alley. You can see that kind of on the left-hand side in the picture there. And they do orient themselves well to Golf Club or to 14th. So let's go through with Plan Commission's recommendation. Can finish up here. It was a 9-month process with significant public outreach and deliberation. For those that were here at the time, we spent a lot of time and actually went through each item by item and gained consensus on each kind of design aspect. Plan Commission weighed all that public testimony and information that you received throughout the process and developed an extensive record that supports the amendments. So a very thorough process, and did recommend approval at a vote of 6-2. So it was not unanimous, but there was a majority 6-2 that recommended approval to send this to the City Council. Since that time, there's been state legislation. So you did this in late 2019. Since that point, there's been state legislation that actually prohibits the administrative or judicial appeal. So if this was to go, or when this goes to the council, it's not like somebody could appeal this. This basically has been such a priority at the state level. The state actually is promoting that cities do away with single family zoning, that they're saying, hey, if you pass this, you don't need to worry about it being appealed. So it's really been a priority. I think I heard on the news the other day, Tacoma, I think, is approving something very similar within the next week or so. And then the plan or the recommendation will be considered at a future regular meeting for the council. So we did this late 2019. We thought, okay, we're going to get this through early 2020, and then COVID happened. And, at that point, timing wasn't right for the, changes to people's zoning. But I think at this point, with not that the pandemic's over, but I think people have come to the realization that, we can work on these types of things and do them in a kind of virtual setting without needing to worry about people being in a meeting. And so I think this is something that will be successful, and we'll move forward at the beginning of next year to the council. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to move on to the fee waiver. If there's any questions on this portion. See Mark with his hand up.
Yeah, I've got a question. I hope can you hear me? Yeah. When this goes to the council, will there be an additional public hearing with the council?
Not specifically. That's the Planning Commission holds the public hearing and develops the record. So that's the purpose of the Planning Commission. One thing that might be brought up by the council, and I've heard it in the past, is there may be some desire for some additional outreach to let people know, kind of what the status of this is and that kind of thing. But if there was to be any additional, specific public hearings or those kinds of things, that would be the role of the planning commission. So
Okay,
I'm not anticipating that.
thank you.
Sorry, Robin. Robin,
So this was a question I had about your first slide, I think, Ryan. But you listed goal 1 and goal 4. And goal 1 was providing sufficient housing of different types so that everybody had an option, essentially. And goal 4 was protecting the character of neighborhoods. In summary, were those prioritized, or were all the goals thought to have equal weight?
Yeah, I don't
Back
think
when the
they're
discussion happened in 2019.
they're not prioritized. I think they're all equal. They're just listed in number order in our comp plan, but none of them are any more important than there others. They all kind of complement each other. And I think the reason I show those two is because number one, you're providing additional supply and variety in how you do that, to all income strata and, accommodating all those units within the city. But you don't want to do that at the expense of the existing neighborhoods, right? So that's that second goal, or goal 4, is how do you accomplish that, but make sure that you do that by not affecting neighborhood character. Does that make sense?
Message of your presentation is we can do both. So,
Yeah, right.
Karen.
Yes, I was interested in the size of the lots and the houses going in with the impact of the neighborhoods. And it's interesting to hear that there would be no restrictions to the duplexes and the triplexes. I was just curious about with the particular size of the structure. I'm thinking a triplex is pretty large. So if you're thinking of a third of an acre with a triplex, the house that you showed on Hall Street is a really large house, and takes up a large portion of the space. So if you were to consider adding a third unit and make something that size to be a triplex on a third of an acre lot, where would be the would there be a restriction to the footprint of those buildings, as well as different items to preserve nature and that kind of a balance to the neighborhood?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, one of the things that we're not changing is we within all of our zones, in all of our residential zones anyway, we have development coverage maximums. So a certain limit that you can cover in both building and impervious surface. So we're not changing those. So somebody would still have to make sure that they meet our development coverage requirements, which limit the amount of buildable area. So you couldn't, there's a lot of things at play. There's buildable land, but there's also setbacks and those kinds of things. And so, we aren't changing those. There will be limitations on how much you can cover in structure and pavement, though. So it's not to say that you could just put up the world's biggest duplex or triplex. You still have to make sure you meet those development coverage requirements. And I'm sorry, I don't have those right off the top of my head, but I know that they'll limit the amount of buildable area on a specific lot.
Yeah, I wasn't here when this was discussed, but I'm assuming that there are height limitations that also come into play.
Correct. So 35 feet is the limitation on our single family zone. So that's gonna be 2 stories. The 35 feet is not gonna. You'd maybe be able to do a flat roof 3-story building, but we wouldn't allow that.
Yeah.
Have to do a pitched roof.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And Karen has another question.
Yeah, it was interesting when you were talking about the height restriction and the sunlight, and if you have a large building on the south side of a 1-story building, you've taken away that person's sunshine. And I was wondering if when reducing the this, the sides, the setback, you were saying that the back or the rear setbacks would be reduced to 5 feet for the single story ADUs. But for duplexes and triplexes, would that 20 feet buffer zone, where would the allowance for access and preservation of the sunlight to existing properties, is that something that would be considered for changes to construction and, you know, the impact of the existing neighborhood and being able to kind of honor the existing value of the property and preserving that value that people have invested in their homes?
Yeah, great question. And you know, so that rear setback change would go from 20 feet down to 15 for those, you know, it could be up to a 2-story. And the idea with that is that you still have a 15-foot rear yard. So if it's casting a shadow, it's going to be, you know, primarily in, you know, the person's backyard that built the structure. The adjacent structure would also have 15 feet of rear yard as well. So you get a 30-foot area between structures. So, you know, if a 30-foot tall building was built, then theoretically you should have, you know, enough space so you're not casting a shadow on somebody else's property. The one way though that we're really, I think, is the important tool in the toolbox that we have about kind of regulating this is through our design review standards. And one of the things that primarily gets brought up is not only sunlight, but also privacy. So, you know, hey, somebody built this, it's got a 2nd-story bedroom window and they can look right into my backyard.
Yeah.
So, you know, how do we address that as well? And you know, that's very difficult to do through zoning regulations, but we can do it through design review. And so that's when, you know, the compatibility requirements tell somebody, you know, hey, you can't put your bedroom window, you know, there. You have to do something. And that's important when it comes to accessory dwelling units as well, especially if we're putting an ADU in a backyard with a 5-foot setback. You know, we're really going to have to make sure that those windows are oriented so that it's not just looking into somebody's backyard. So that's one thing that our planners do a really good job at, is actually pulling open the plans and looking at how this thing is oriented and making sure that you know, privacy is being addressed as well.
Okay,
Any other questions? Let me get back in. Like I said, death by PowerPoint. Here we go. All right, let's talk about the fee waiver program. Oh, that was weird. Okay, so let's talk about the fee waiver program. So again, not something the Planning Commission is going to be weighing in on, but is informational and something that the council will consider as this whole package moves forward in early 2022. So we do have an existing fee waiver program. So that's in our municipal code 1.20, which currently authorizes fee waivers for community-based housing development organizations. Those are also known in the business as CHODOs, Boys and Girls Club, and Habitat for Humanity. Those are the 3 that are specifically authorized within our municipal code. Those fees that can be waived are all building, mechanical, plumbing, and electrical. So your standard, you know, what you need to build a house type permits. Also the plan check associated with that. So that's the staff's time to review the plans. That's our plan check fee, which is separate from our building permit fee. That is waived. The actual water meter fee, our transportation mitigation fees. So with all new dwellings, a transportation fee is assessed, that could be waived. And then a fee that's not necessarily specifically waived, but it could be deferred for a future time till, you know, later on down the road would be the wastewater connection. So that's the sewer connection can actually, the payment of that can be deferred, which is a way for somebody to maybe get some additional revenue before they have to pay for an expensive wastewater connection. Do have some really good experience with this. I think the one that comes to mind is our Habitat for Humanity project, Deo Vista on 37th near College. And this project took full advantage of all these fee waivers. And according to the executive director at Habitat, that project would not have been feasible without these fee waivers. So it was a great success story where we got some affordable housing, and through that they accessed this fee waiver program. So when we were looking at expanding this, we have our what supports this. First of all, our affordable housing strategy, which is recommends that we look at expanding this to the private sector that is also building affordable housing. When we look at this, though, we need to make sure that the program criteria are correct. And so it's different when you have the affordable housing community building units, because they are generally overseeing those themselves. When you have the private sector building that, the oversight of that and the implementation of the program is required to be a little bit more nuanced, because it takes more, I'll say, skin in the game from the city to oversee that program and to make sure that those affordable units are maintaining their affordability over time. So within that, so we have the program criteria, which is in a draft LMC, that draft ordinance that the council will be considering. So we've got, first of all, income thresholds. So income thresholds that this would apply to, we've proposed that it be 80% or lower AMI. That's consistent with our other waivers, like with our multifamily tax exemption. If you do an affordable unit there, that's the 80% AMI threshold there. If you were to do something lower than that, so if you wanted to really just only apply this to very low income, something like 50% AMI might be appropriate. We have a minimum number of units designated within a development, so you couldn't just do, one, two units. We've got a minimum number required. Length of time the unit is required to stay affordable is really important. There's been several discussions going on. Our draft regulations state that these are required to stay affordable in perpetuity. So some communities say, hey, you do this, but they need to stay affordable for 10 years, 20 years. At this point, the draft regulations would state that these stay affordable in perpetuity or until they're removed from the program, which is the next one. That if you're removed from the program, you could do that within the next, you could keep it affordable for 5 years, but removing it requires the repayment of all those fees that were assessed. As I mentioned, the monitoring is really important. The city doesn't necessarily have the resources to be able to monitor this on an ongoing basis. So the draft code actually requires a developer to enter into a partnership with a nonprofit for management and oversight of the affordability of the unit. So that would be somebody like the Housing Authority potentially, or Homes First. We've had discussions. They seem open to the idea. But this is something that would need to be ironed out if we did have somebody that wanted to take advantage of it. And that would require annual reporting. So the city would be involved in the annual reporting part of this through that partnership with the nonprofit. We've done, council has been briefed. I believe we did the land use committee about a year or so ago, year and a half ago on this. And they suggested, hey, we think it's a great idea, but let's do some outreach and talk to those folks in our community that are building units and see what their feelings are. So we reached out to OMB, Olympia Master Builders, with their government affairs committee, as well as the Thurston Chamber, and got some good feedback from them. There was concerns that they had concerns on the proposal. The first is that they're worried about increasing permit fees to subsidize reductions. So if we got an abundance of fee waivers, their concern would be, well, we would need to make up the revenue that we would be losing associated with those fee reductions. And so they had concerns that we do not raise fees on kind of the for-profit side of things to subsidize the reductions in the fees for affordable housing. They also had concerns that maybe they wouldn't even take advantage of the program because they have such limited experience in providing low-income units. So when we're talking to our local builders, building community, they really don't provide low-income units. So they're not the type that could even really take advantage of this. It's really going to be folks that are from outside of the community coming in that maybe have more experience. But what we did here was that this is an important tool and it could improve development feasibility. So if something was just on the threshold of being feasible, this is something that could potentially put it over the top if we were able to waive fees as a result of low-income units. So the next step, I'll see we got some questions. Next step is the ordinance has been drafted and it will go to the city council for consideration as part of this package as well. So again, stop sharing there. Any questions? I think Robin had her hand up.
I don't know if this is a question or a statement, but the concern that local developers don't have experience providing low-income units seems like a reason to do this, not a reason not to do this, because we don't have enough affordable housing and the people local in our community should know how to build affordable units. So I find that feedback we got interesting.
Yeah, that's a good, that's a good counterpoint to that. To that thing of, well, we lack experience. Well, maybe this is something that would then, lend itself to somebody because the thing with low income units is that it creates additional risk, right? So, that's particularly why, our local development community probably doesn't want to take this on, as it's additional risk that has limited benefit, limited reward. And so if we are lowering that risk by lowering their costs, maybe that's something that they would take advantage of.
Yeah.
Well, the other part of it too is you hear as we talk about housing choices, housing costs, the market. You also hear from the private development groups that the costs of building is driving housing costs. The fees and impact fees and regulations, those type of things. So this is a path too to say, hey, we're willing to eliminate our fees for the public benefit if you build that low income housing. And then we are in those conversations, they bring that up, that we have a program here you can capitalize and not do those fees if you want to do low income housing. I think also too, there's going back pre-COVID, it's funny how we're now having pre and post-COVID conversations or references. But the pre-COVID, there was a lot of activity around meeting with the housing action team, and there were there was a lot of interest along a private-public partnership, and there were some private investors that kind of put together a little bit of a framework. And what they saw was having a combination of market rate and low income, but in order to make it pencil out, would be to have some fee waivers for those low income units or for more of the project. But also they were saying that there are local investors in the community that want to get back to their community, but they still have to make some level of profit, maybe not the typical return on investment, but some level so they don't are subsidized. But that's where that partnership comes back in. So as we move forward, there may be a possibility that we can resurrect some of those conversations in the distant and not too distant future in order to see if that's a possibility. But the first step is this something that we want to try to provide as an incentive?
Kieran.
Yeah, I was thinking of the agenda that we had received with the information for today, and I think that it had said that the fee waivers were looking at supporting that 80% is moderate income or a 50% low income, having 20% of the buildings to earn this waiver. So is it 20% of housing provided for people at 50% of the AMI, or is it 20% for people who are at 80%? Or is that I was just wondering where that 20% actually sat to earn those fee waivers.
Yeah, so the 20% is the percentage of the overall units within a development that's required to be, low income. So if you had, for example, and really when we talked to the development community, they said, hey, this really is only going to apply to multifamily structures. It's going to be, pretty much impossible to do this on a single family subdivision basis. So it's really going to be applicable in a multifamily context. So 20% of that, or let's say you have 100 units, 20 units need to be dedicated for low income folks. So that means that 20% needs to be dedicated to that. What still needs discussion with the council is what should the income level be? And so we've got kind of two different ideas. One is 80% or less. The other is 50% or less. The thing with the 80% or less is 80%, I don't have exactly what the AMI is for Lacey, like as of today, but 80% is amazingly high. And so, you're going to get a lot of folks that qualify at 80% that, because our area median income is relatively high, versus 50% or a lower amount is really going to be, those folks that are at the lowest of the low income, like those that maybe are on social assistance programs, or, maybe just coming out of being homeless, or those kinds of things. And so really the discussion on this is, who should this program target? And should it be the lowest of the low income, or should it be more kind of more at a market rate? So I don't have an answer for what should it be, 80 or 50%. I think it's up to the council as a policy, as a body that sets policy as to what that appropriate level should be.
I was just thinking about that, seeing the numbers from when we were looking at the housing study before, but I thought that they were saying the median income is about 65,000. So 80% of that is still 50,000, which is a lot of money for maybe a single mom or a family who's working in retail or something else. And so 50% is again 30,000. So it's interesting to see what kind of families and what kind of work they can have to afford housing in our city.
We just working on a multifamily tax exemption application for the 6th Avenue apartments located on 6th Avenue is being built right now. And part of that information is we were able, that exemption is not being qualified for low income, but through the process, we identified what the 80% AMI for a studio apartment was, and it was just under $1,100 a month, and then 60% was somewhere around 850, if I remember right. So that kind of gives you kind of the range of what that 80% and 60% really means in terms of dollars. As Ryan was mentioning, it seems high to us because that seems like still, because wages aren't keeping up with those numbers, as we saw in the affordable housing strategy that we put together and based on certain type of jobs. But you mentioned, Karen, a minimum number of units being 20% of the project. Is that what you mentioned? And I don't know if with a fee waiver, I know we're looking at per unit base. So I don't know if there's a requirement that there be a mix. Is there, Ryan, in the fee waiver, but in the multifamily tax, I know there's a cap on the number of low income units that'd be talked about next.
Yeah, so are you talking about a maximum cap, Rick?
And the multifamily tax exemption, there was a maximum cap of low income units. I think it was a percentage of the total number of units. But with the fee waiver proposal, is there a requirement that a minimum number of units be low income in the project?
I believe it's 20% for a minimum number.
Eddie and then Mark.
Yeah, I'm curious about the actual fees that are being waived. I know the developers made the point that they don't want to see the fees increase to cover that, but I guess I'm trying to get my head around. My assumption is that the city assesses these fees to cover the costs of the development or the mitigation. So if those fees stop coming in, those costs still need to be covered. So is that coming out of the general fund then? Are the taxpayers funding that, or how does that work?
I'll defer to the director on that one. I'm not exactly sure.
And apologies, can you restate that? Because I was looking at the ordinance as you're speaking. So
yeah, I'm trying to understand the fees that are waived. my assumption would be that those fees are to cover costs and mitigations that need to occur. So if those fees are no longer coming in, how are those costs going to be covered? Are they going to, the developer said they don't want it to fall on their for-profit side of things. So does that mean it falls on the taxpayers? And is that would that be a line item in the budget, or how would that work?
It would be absorbed. And so there's different types of fees that can be waived. Building permit review fees. So those will just be absorbed into our departmental budget. So we wouldn't, it wouldn't be passed on to anybody else necessarily. And it'd just be a cost and come out of our overall general fund. So it's splitting the pie a little bit more in a sense. In terms of impact fees, like school impact fees, those type of things, same again, those will be absorbed by the district. And that's why when we look at these fee waivers, we have to tie it to if we're going to use public funds or not use, collect public funds for public purposes, we have to show that public benefit. And is the public benefit of providing low income housing greater than that absorption of fees? That's Mark.
Mark, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, I know that contractors, we're finding them interested in building single family homes and a lot of apartment complexes. But what the missing element when we were talking about this a couple of years ago seemed to be condos and townhouses. I think a lot of it had to do with liability. I'm not sure if the states address that or not, but do these fee waivers, do they provide an incentive for people to build condos and townhouses?
It can. The challenge with the condo market, though, again, is the condo liability laws and having experienced developers that can navigate those condo liability laws. And of course, there's been a couple of efforts over the past couple of years to amend those or revise those condo laws at the state level, and they just haven't quite gotten there yet. But the condo is a very important housing type in the market that provides that intermediate step. I just found an article I'll maybe share with the Planning Commission later on tonight from the Seattle Times talking about the housing market. And quite interesting, that's a story of a couple that lived up in the Pierce County looking for a house that worked at JBLM. They had to cast a wider net. And they found a condo in Lacey for, was it around $350,000 or so, 3-bedroom condo. And that's a pretty good price in the market for an intermediate step to get into housing. But there are some challenges there. But that whole trying how we work and try to create that condo market is an important thing I think we need to look at going forward. But there's a lot of things outside of a local city's control to do so.
Thank you.
Other questions? No. Okay, Ryan.
Good. Share my screen one last time. Okay, so last thing here is the extension of the multifamily tax exemption program, LMC 3.64. So our multifamily tax exemption program, this was established in 2014 and will expire in December 31st, 2024. Council takes action to extend it. What this does is it exempts payment of property taxes for the residential portion of multifamily projects of 20 units or more, specifically within the Woodland District or Lacey Midtown. So the regulations actually state you have to establish a target area, which for us is only limited to the Woodland District. This establishes a 8-year exemption for market rate and a 12-year exemption if you do 20% low income. And this is at 80% or below area median income. So, unlike the fee waiver program, which is basically in perpetuity, this basically says that for the, the first 12 years of a project, you need to do 20% low income. But after those 12 years, there's no restriction. Those can be back to market rate. One project that we've had, I think Rick already mentioned, is that MGR Apartments on 6th Avenue that has utilized this exemption. But it's really been our only project for multifamily at all in the Woodland District since about like 2007. It's important to note, though, that the recommendation of the Lacey Midtown market analysis is to extend this program, given that it has a significant positive impact on the economics of the redevelopment, and that there is a limited window for future projects to take advantage of the program, given that we have this December 31st, 2024 deadline looming. And so when developers are looking at feasibility of a project, one of the things they'll look at is this multifamily tax exemption program, and whether or not they'll be able to complete a project by the time in their analysis of their project, they're going to have to make sure that they have enough time built in that they don't miss the window if this was to expire December 31st of 2024. So to take that kind of out of the equation, or to better kind of meet up with what might be anticipated from a developer, the next step in this would be for the council to consider an ordinance to, I guess, either extend the program or eliminate the deadline altogether. So if they're happy with the program, want to extend it, we could do that, or we could just eliminate the deadline associated with the program. So on this, I think the main thing for us is seeing where the council's at as far as extending the program or eliminating that deadline. But I know that there's going to be concerns brought up about potential impacts to junior taxing districts when it comes to the multifamily, the tax exemption part of this, because it can impact some of those folks that are providing services to this building that maybe the building's not generating a certain amount of tax revenue for. So I think there'll be concerns there. There may also be desires to expand this to other areas of the city. And our comp plan says if we were to extend this, the primary next place that we would extend this to would be Martin Way, the Martin Way corridor, but there might be other areas that this could be expanded to. And so I would imagine that those discussions might occur as well. So I guess at this point, I'll turn it over to you for questions. That was pretty much it. We just wanted to let you know that was out there. It's we did that Woodland District market analysis, and we have some good feedback as part of that. And this is a specific recommendation of that document, is to move forward this extension of this program. So see Robin with her hand up.
I guess I'm trying to sort out which of these incentives has a greater typical value. So we've had the multi-family tax exemption on the books for a while. We've got this one example of an organization taking advantage of it. We're considering waiving fees for new developments, but what are the estimated dollar amounts, the values of those two things? And I know it's not an apples to apples comparison, and that often a developer builds something and then sells it to somebody else who reaps the benefit of the tax exemption. But what do we have estimates of the value of these programs?
Rick, do you have any idea from MGR?
Yes. We don't have the exact numbers yet, because the final assessments won't happen until they're close to certificate of occupancy, which is due next August, and we do the final numbers. But just on current values that I looked up, thinking back, it was just 3 weeks ago, I believe the tax saving for the developer was somewhere around 160 or 140,000 a year. That's estimated current assessed value, cut price, and all the junior taxing districts.
That's for the 6th Street development?
Yes. So it's about 150,000 per year for a period of 8 years. And so you build that up, that helps with their financing, and they take that money savings and put it back in either the project or buy down and that cost. In terms of a direct impact to like the city of Lacey, it's about $9,000 a year in tax collections for the city of Lacey in a race relationship. There are larger property tax districts, like say the school district, it gets a little bit more substantial. It's like in the 35 to 40 range, I believe, if I remember correctly. So it just depends on the levy rates and the value of the buildings. One of the challenges, as Ryan mentioned, it creates a situation where if something comes on the rolls and it's covered under the multifamily tax program, how that really affect taxes. Dependent right now, the way it's viewed by Department of Revenue and local county assessor's offices, if it comes on the rolls prior to the deadline for setting next year's assessment, they take the partial constructed value. That could mean that the tax is added to the assessed valuation of the city, and then it's spread out amongst all the taxpayers. And so there's a tax shift, if you will. If it comes after that date, then that value is foregone tax and it's not counted as part of the overall city assessed valuation. And then it becomes, you're not getting that incremental increase. So then it goes back to, what is that public benefit? Are we trying to create a public benefit? Is it spurring development and the type of effort they're trying to housing production that has been identified in our strategic plans? And so when you look at that exponential impact, is that worth the loss of tax revenue or the shift of that tax revenue? In the Midtown efforts, there has been identified since the Downtown 2000 plan in the late 90s that was developed as a vision to try to create a more mixed-use district, trying to get that residential. And there's an idea that you get more people living there, you create more of an 18-hour day. You also create more economic opportunities in terms of restaurant, retail, other type of services. So you get that exponential growth. So one of the strategies of the multifamily tax is to encourage that residential development, but you would make up some of that in that exponential growth that could occur around it. That would be both property tax and sales tax. And then when year 9 hits, all that value comes back on the tax roll and you get a bump in your assessed valuation and your collection. So while it's foregone, it may not, it'll come back at some point in the year 9 or year 13, depending on which program. Now, the challenges with the junior taxing districts is, I would use the fire, emergency response, and schools as an example. If they aren't collecting that tax rate, there is still a service that they are providing to either if there's children or if there's emergency response. And so that's where they kind of get caught up. But even though we're, may get that value later on, it affects us because we're still providing direct service. And so that's the kind of conversation that council's had in the past with their partners with the junior taxing districts. And so that's something I expect they would have that same conversation on Thursday night of how that really affects them and what it makes sense going forward. But again, as Ryan articulated, this is something that's been identified as a strategy for the Midtown district, which is why that's our current target area. And the idea is we already have one project taking advantage of it, which is the first residential project we have built there since 2008. And that same developer is considering additional residential development within that area to create more density and infill. So there's some potential opportunities going forward that would encourage that type of development.
When was this initiated? When did we start this tax?
2014. So it's got a 10-year, I think that was why it's 2024. It had a 10-year window.
Okay. Two of which went to COVID, essentially, right? I mean, nobody was doing much building during that time. Okay, that's good. All right, thank you.
Kirian has her hand up.
Kirian, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I live right on the edge of Midtown, and it's an amazing neighborhood. You can walk everywhere. There's bike paths. There's, like you said, it's a great neighborhood, and I always drive by these possibilities, and I don't understand why people haven't developed. It seems like encouraging people to take that step in this neighborhood would be an amazing thing to to really build up our city and reduce those impacts of, people having to take cars and being detrimental to our environment. It's a great neighborhood.
And these are going to the council Thursday, is that right?
Yep. So Thursday, 4:00,
4
if
o'clock.
anybody would want to attend.
And thank you very much, Ryan. Are there any additional announcements or communications that people have? I don't see any hands flying in the air. All right, so our next meeting is December 21st, is that right? Yes, December 21st. I assume everyone will be here. Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.